The UN, as of course it should, uses most of its time to attack Israel, the only state that where Jews actually kind of feel safe. And we are talking about the state that just yesterday has been sent missile over it, and it's still one of the safest place for Jewish people. So basically, what's happening is you have both at the UN as well as the Arab League conference have committed to, well, we'll read exactly what they committed to or what they would like to see when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Israel and the so-called Palestinian state. And we'll cover all of that. Welcome to the reality show. Joining me today is Michael Kaufman. And also today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by the Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. Amazon link is in the chat and in the description, and you'll be able to hear a bit more about them later in the video. So, Michael, I'll jump to you almost immediately. I'll just mention one thing. I'm reading this. I think this was in Ynet. Arab and Muslim countries, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, and Turkey, signed a declaration Tuesday condemning for the first time Hamas's onslaught of October 7, 2023, and calling on the Palestinian terror group to release all hostages it is holding, disarm and end its rule in Gaza, a bid to end the devastating war in the Strip. So, on the face of it, this looks like, oh my God, it only took them 2 years to actually condemn the slaughter on October 7th. But when you go a bit further into it, what they use it is say, okay, yeah, it was bad, but now give them a state and give them a fully way to arm themselves and, give them another chance if they would like to. Michael?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, they also condemned Israel in the same document for Israel's attacks on civilians, because after all, every civilian death in Gaza, according to all the Arab states and the other formerly French state known as France, is because of Israel. So they once again set up moral equivalence between the so-called Palestinians and Israel, and while they did for the first time ever condemn, what they're doing is rather clever, right? They understand that Donald Trump is not putting up with any of the crap. He's not Obama. He's not Obama. He's not Biden, and he's not Harris. And Trump is not going to put up with any kind of agreement that doesn't eradicate or doesn't at least profess to get rid of Hamas. So what they did was couch this nicely. They said, okay, we'll give up Hamas in order to put in the Palestinian Authority, which is arguably a slightly less antagonist to Israel, but really wants to annihilate Israel either. And none of them are interested. None of these Muslim countries are really interested in a two-state solution at all. What they're interested in is a one-state solution where Israel ceases to exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should correct myself that what I've read was actually from Times of Israel, because now I'm reading a bit further. So basically, in the same document, it was also signed by the EU. It also talks about reviving the two-state solution for Israel and Palestinians. Quote, in the context of ending the war in Gaza, Hamas must end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority, with international engagement and support in line with the objective of sovereign and independent Palestinian state. And again, this there is nothing new here. Like, this is not some kind of concession from the Palestinians. The fact is that they've only received from Israel. They've got Gaza. They've got Area A from Israel. Israel has been increasingly pulling away. Well, thankfully, recently it has been actually going is being sort of a more proactive, as well as there is the recent declaration by the Knesset, which is not sort of formal, not binding declaration, but talked about basically applying Israeli law to the Area C of the Judea and Samaria, meaning that would de facto mean annexation, which technically Area C is not sort of like, I guess, like a full part of
Israel
Israel.
proper, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
Israel
Israel
proper.
proper,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But again, talking about a two-state solution is like, it's, I don't know what to call it. Like, well, if they were honest, I would say it's tone deaf. If they were honest, I would say it's completely misguided. But the fact is that they are not honest. This is a complete dishonesty. I mean, Michael, what kind of person could, after October 7, after the long time that Hamas has been in power in Gaza, say, okay, okay, we need to go back to two-state solution. This is, this time it will work out. It didn't work out with Yasser Arafat, who basically got a perfect deal to establish a state, but would rather say, no, I'd rather just continue to see what can I get away with when it comes to killing Jews. And let's put the Palestinian Authority back that pays its own citizens when they kill Jews.
Yeah, look at it. All you need to do, a couple of points. All you need to do is look at what the Palestinian Authority has done in the Western Bank areas, which are also called Judea and Samaria, and are also called areas A, B, and C, depending on their relative Jewish and Arab populations. With Area C, as you said already, Daniel, I believe, being more Jewish, and Area A being more Arab. I'm pretty sure I got that right this time because I always get them backwards.
It,
Um,
well, it's
so-
not that much about them being Arab or it means who control them. Area A is controlled by the Palestinian Authority, and
right, right.
Area C is
Yeah, that's the
controlled.
way I think of. And I can tell you, I've been through only once, through Area C and part of Area B, and even between C and B, the part that, to be blunt, the part that's controlled by the Jewish people in Area C is just a nicer part to live. Despite the fact that money has flowed into the Palestinian Authority almost as richly as it has flowed into Gaza, the Palestinian Authority has had decades to construct a society which would be interested in employing people and creating some kind of a reasonable life for its people. They have chosen almost the same level of terrorism as Gaza. I mean, granted, they haven't fortified underground the way that Gaza has with Hamas, but there are a large number of terrorists occupying in the West Bank areas. There are a large number of Israeli operations on a daily basis going on in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank area. Um, these are not, there's no state here, and there's also no leader. And what this is kind of the baloney that goes on with these so-called diplomats, especially on the European side, where they love to sit around and have commissions and have talk shows, and there's nobody to lead this thing to some sort of reasonable democracy. There's not, or even some kind of a place that recognizes individual rights and actually is interested in the flourishing of its citizens. That's not that's not any part of the Palestinian Authority. It never has been. If it had been, it would have been done decades ago. And remember that the people that are in Gaza voted for Hamas. This is the other ridiculous thing about all of this. The civilians in Gaza, these so-called innocent civilians, voted in their equivalent of Hitler, who got them into deep trouble. This was an election, as best as we can tell. It was as free and as fair as any Middle Eastern election would be. And they
Well, no,
decided,
actually, it was pretty much the only free election in the Middle East
no, I
besides
agree.
Israel,
Yes, I
because it was
agree.
controlled by both the American State
Yes.
Department and Israel,
Yeah,
or
and they
oversaw. Yeah.
voted. The Gaza voted to put in Hamas over the Palestinian Authority. So the notion that there are innocent civilians who somehow didn't really want Hamas and they didn't really want to attack Israel and kill. No, what the civilians wanted was for Israel to be gone and for Hamas to take over. And what the civilians in Gaza got was a disaster. And Hamas continues to love this disaster. And then you have these absurd countries. And we all know that the Muslim countries are all going to vote in favor of a two-state solution. But now we've got people like Britain and France, especially France, that are talking about recognizing a Palestinian state. There's no state here, folks. There's no real country. It's not like suddenly we're going to get cocoa beans, other than cocaine, coming out of these areas. I mean, we're not going to get anything productive in these areas with the current leadership.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat says, "Are you crazy? There are real children dying. Are okay?" I mean, the, like the people who say that, I don't know what you imagine the war is like, or what you imagine the world to be like. Are you saying that as soon as, let's say a Russian kid dies, that means, okay, Ukraine now has to surrender, a Russian child is dead? There were German children dying during World War
Hamas
II.
is killing Hamas is killing as many of their own people as Israel is. And to that person on the chat, this war would be over in 30 seconds. Two things need to happen. Hamas needs to give up and give back the hostages. Then the war is over. And then there's so-called no more children dying. So stop blaming Israel for dying children. This is one and only one group. It's like blaming the Allies because Hitler killed the Jews. It's absurd. So there is no argument. And war, shit happens in war. Bad things happen in war. Bad things happen every day. But this notion of blaming Israel because kids are dying, that's Hamas's fault. It has one and only one group that is responsible for this. That narrative is the only factual narrative that there is.
Yeah, and again, Palestinians themselves are responsible for this. You are a parent, your child is at risk, and you don't do anything. You don't stand up to Hamas. You don't try to fight it. You don't try to fight for something better. Again, if the mentality of the well, I want to, because like I don't accept this idea that Palestinians do not support Hamas. They do support Hamas. They want this to happen.
Time
So
and
this
time
is
again, polls have shown that they do. The
yeah.
last poll that I'm aware of is 80% support. 80%.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how the question is sort of asked. But yeah, they do support. When Hamas is not the more popular one, they support people like Marwan Barghouti, the person who, the orchestrator of the first Intifada. Now I'm trying to remember which one it was.
Yeah, I can't
Uh,
remember. Yeah.
yeah, when they get a chance, they support the violence against the Jewish people. This is what they want. So your children will die. This is what you sign up for. You said you wanted war, you got war. This is what happens. You said you want to go fight the one country that is letting water is managing water for you. Gaza is not even responsible for its own water. That is letting the aid in. That is providing you work. Gaza doesn't even have enough work. This is a sign of a broken society, a society that doesn't even have enough work to basically supply its own citizens. It's Israel, the modern society, that has the problems of not having enough people to actually fulfill all the work. Because in any productive society, in any sort of even relatively free society, there's always more work than there are people to ever do so. This is not the case in Gaza.
That's what I mean when I
Yeah.
talk about a productive society, a real country. This notion that there will be a Palestinian state and suddenly there's going to be tax accountants and people that are doing trades and so on, and we're going to have normalcy of day-to-day living. It's complete fantasy land. And frankly, all of the leaders, especially in Europe, know this. They all know this. This is all just anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, all packaged together in a neat little package, with a picture of a starving kid who has malnutrition who's being treated in Italy on the cover. And it's really amazing what a job is being done.
Somebody in the chat says Gazan support for Hamas as of May 2025 set at around 37%. Now, I'm not sure if he meant that as a debunking of what you said, which I think might be true. But even if that was true, imagine if on April 1945, support for the Nazi party was at 37%. You would think, okay, this society is like deeply corrupt, that they are basically what do they say about Gaza? On the brink of starvation, nobody likes Hamas. There is a genocide going on at 37%. You're telling me 37% of the population still likes the people who are like American president right now has like what is like a positive opinion, like 48% usually, or around 50%, and you don't get
Yeah,
further.
not
And you
even. Yes,
yeah, and you're telling
exactly.
me Hamas, that is behind all of this, is only 10 points behind that. This is ridiculous. The amount of it's ridiculous that that support would be for Hamas, and that would be viewed as something like, okay, that's not actually too bad. Not that many
It's
support
one out of
Hamas.
every, well, almost one out of every two and a half people clearly support Hamas. I mean, I don't, frankly, I don't believe that number. It may be that that number is true for is true for if you just ask, do you support Hamas versus the Palestinian Authority or versus Islamic Jihad or versus the Muslim Brotherhood? But taken together in terms of who's running things there, and does it really matter, folks? Are there people on the chat today on watching this show that are going to tell me that the Palestinian Authority wants to live side by side with Israel and create a productive society for its members? Is this what you're fighting for when you're arguing with us? Because I don't get it. It's not like there's any leadership at all on the so-called Palestinian. I'm saying call them Palestinians because it used to be the Jews were Palestinians because it was all British Palestine. So this is a made-up name anyway. But I would like to understand who you think is going to actually come in and do this job that's going to lead this area to be a productive area.
Yeah, I mean, just to, I'm at the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, the company that does the polling in Gaza and the so-called West Bank. And I'm just looking like different things. And when it comes to the question, how much are you satisfied with this group in the performance on this war? And when it comes to Hamas, the satisfaction is at 57% in 2 months ago. 2 months ago, the support for them is 57%. So again, like trying to tell us that Palestinians do not want this, that they are simply the hostages of this war, they're hostages held by Hamas, is ridiculous. They want this. They would prefer dying than surrendering, than ending the war. Michael,
But that is what, and
yeah.
we should all be clear. That's what's happening. I have to say that people's ability to basically put out a group of so-called civilians and say that they're victims while they are getting the crap beat out of them. And there's no future for Gaza. There is no future for Gaza. Do you really think that some leader over there is going to come and rebuild Gaza? That they're going to come up with some kind of new deal and that they're going to be able to put together institutions and infrastructure? What I would like to know what realistic scenario there is for anyone who's running any of the countries in the Middle East to go in there and construct anything.
And again, even then, like this doesn't, when it comes to building a society, it doesn't come from government coming in and building it. It comes from individual. Where are the Palestinian entrepreneurs? Where are the Palestinian people who want to build something? You don't see anything. Again, they rely on aid. Without aid, like we see what's happening now. Without aid, they are not able to even survive. This is the state of the Palestinian society. The only productive Palestinians that there are the ones who work in Israel, because Israel is the only place that actually provides even some form of productivity for them. And even that they use against Israel. They use to fight Israel. Let's switch back to the UN a bit more. So the Israeli UN ambassador Dani Danon has criticized the countries participating in the conference. He said there are those in the world who fight terrorists and extremist forces, and then there are those who turn a blind eye to them or resort to appeasement. And I cannot imagine having this job. I cannot imagine being the UN the Israeli ambassador to the UN, because you have to constantly sit there and listen to dictatorships talk to you about how to fight the war, talk to you about how you're not feeding your enemies enough. The fact that Israel is still participating, that's honestly, that's probably the most disappointing part. As much as I don't want to victim blame, because this is what it is, like saying Israel is not fighting well enough or Israel is not doing things as properly as it should be. This is absolutely victim blaming. It should be on Hamas to actually do what is. It's actually all the blame should be on Hamas. That's what I meant to say. I have a clip from Guterres. I don't know if you want to say something first or if we should just play it.
Well, Guterres is a great example of why the UN is such a corrupt institution, but let's go ahead with the clip. Go ahead.
Choisissons enfin la voie de la paix, non pas comme un concept, mais comme un engagement, non pas comme un rêve, mais comme une réalité pour les Palestiniens, pour les Israéliens, pour les peuples du Moyen-Orient et du monde entier.
Oh, I forgot he was speaking in a foreign language. So people who are on the podcast, he basically talked about how we need to we need to achieve the two-state solution, not as a concept, but we need to commit to it. It has to be a reality for Palestinians and Israelis. But this is exactly what is devoid from reality.
And all the people of the Middle East, except I
yeah.
guess the Druze. The Druze don't count because they're allowed to be massacred. Because Gutierrez is, as far as I'm aware, pretty much silent on that. Pretty much. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
I think we've done an episode around it. I think he said the same line, like, "Oh, ceasefire should happen, bad things shouldn't happen, things like that."
Right.
But not directly calling it out.
What I want to understand is when these people talk, and I invite people on that are watching us today because I, for the life of me, have not heard a single coherent argument in support of a peace treaty with a terrorist organization. And I will remind people that the peace treaty that Israel currently has with Lebanon, or at least the ceasefire, is with Lebanon. It is not with Hezbollah. It is with Lebanon. And there's a good reason for that, because you cannot have a peace treaty with someone who's a terrorist. It's like saying I'm going to have a peace treaty with a lion when they're hungry. It doesn't work. It's contrary to their nature. If you're a terrorist, what you do is one thing. You terrorize, you kill, you maim, you scare. You don't create anything of value. And that's the other thing I want people to think about. What value have the Palestinian Authority and frankly, the West Bank people contributed to the world in the last 30 years? 30 years, folks. Let's hear it. I think it was even longer since Arafat turned down what was a very nice peace treaty. I think it was longer, but there certainly were peace treaties offered way before the 2000 flipped over. Anyway, this is absurd. And the notion that we're going to move from Hamas to the Palestinian Authority, and that's going to lead us to a peaceful solution, is changing from a lion to a hungry tiger.
Now, well, when it comes to again, dealing with the realistic solutions, let's look at what sort of the UN even thinks about when it comes to this realistic peace we want to achieve. So it said it urged an end to Israel's ban of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees and their Descendants, UNRWA, while reiterating the Palestinian right of return to places in Israel they left or were expelled from surrounding the 1948 creation of the State of Israel, a notion ruled out by successive Israeli governments which contend this would undermine the existence as a Jewish state. So again, we are talking about the sort of creation of the Palestinian state. And when they say, okay, yeah, we want a Palestinian state, so that means 500,000 of Israelis will have to get out of Judea and Samaria because, that's an occupied territory. You would most likely have to return the East Jerusalem, which again was them declaring war or sort of actively fighting against Israel, and also the infinite right of return, meaning about 8 million Palestinians should return to Israel proper. There is no realistic solution about this. This is straight up saying like this is calling for war. This is basically saying Israeli state should be destroyed because this is what it is. The Israeli state right now has about 2 million Arabs. And as much as, they are full citizens and they should be, and they should afford our rights, the fact is those Arabs many of them do not like the state of Israel, and some of them are calling for its destruction. So, and we are talking about Arab Israelis who have been living there for 80 years, and they still are not necessarily happy with the Israeli state. And what you're saying is, oh, let's get 8 million Palestinians who actively want to fight the state of Israel and let them return and see what happens. There is nothing realistic about this. There is nothing this is not a serious request. This is not something that you go to a negotiating table and you expect to achieve some kind of deal. This is straight up calling for destruction of Israel. There is nothing else behind it. Michael?
Yeah, look, I think, again, this is one of these hypotheticals that is so despicable in its construction. So let's say we agree to it. I'm American. Let's just say we Americans agree to it. At the same time, we have to sign over the U.S. back to the Native Americans, the American Indians, because that they have the same right of return according to this baloney. They have the same right of return to the United States lands that the Palestinians, so-called, have to Israel. So U.S. is gone now because we all agree. And by the way, almost every population in Europe will be displaced one way or the other, because every population that's been displaced in Europe, which is an enormous numbers of hundreds of millions of people since World War II, even not forget. And I don't know enough about World War I and so on. Were displaced. Those land. I mean, what is this right of return crap? This is absurd. This is not applied to any other country in the world. And if it's going to be applied in Israel, then the United States should stand up and say, we're giving back all the land to the Native Americans. And that's how absurd this whole thing is. And the only reason it's allowed to continue is because it has to be it's an attack on Israel. And frankly, the Israelis are stupid enough to respond. And that is part of the problem, that this is not a question. The Israelis should say very simply, when America gives its land back to the Native Americans, the American Indians, then we will discuss this. Until then, it's off the table. Next. That's how you respond to this, not get into a discussion about how many and if and where and so on and so forth. And by the way, the 8,000 Israelis that were forcibly removed from Gaza should all go back to Gaza as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like all the Jews from the Middle East were kicked out of their Arab nations. Like this whole idea is ridiculous. But also, you talk about Native Americans. People at the UN would probably actually call for to give Native Americans some land, which of course they do have. Like America is like the native, the reservations are, depending on how you ask, not part of America. In many of them, they apply tribal law. They basically have their sort of like separate institutions. Now, some of American law still applies, but they do have a certain exception. But when it comes to this right of return, as you said, it isn't really applied anywhere else. Germans were kicked out of Czechia and Poland after World War II, and Russia for that matter. And we're talking about millions of Germans were kicked out. Who is calling for and also what Germans would want to go from their living in Germany right now back to Czechia or Poland? Not that those countries are bad, but Germany is doing much better. So again, like this whole issue shows the fact that this is not serious. This is not like serious trying to find some sort of solution. It's just to have something to bash over the head of Israel. That's why they keep saying that the Golan Heights are an occupied territory. That's why they keep referring to the occupied West Bank, despite the fact that the areas have been controlled by Israel. Well, some of the areas have been controlled by Israel for 80 years. Like, at what point will it not become an occupied territory? When did we decide to take a snapshot in history and basically decide that these are the perpetual borders that will have to live forever? We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. And a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. It truly seems like, yeah, basically there was like a snapshot taken and now nothing can change ever. The fact was that when Israeli state was established, the Arab countries surrounding them declared war and Israel defended itself successfully. And somehow, because Israel defended itself successfully, now it is a problem. Now all of it is an occupied territory. No, Israel established itself. There is no Palestinian state. That wasn't, they had a chance to establish a Palestinian state. They said, no, we would rather try get our chance and try to wipe out Israel.
I believe six at last count. Somewhere north of 3, for sure, chances to establish a Palestinian state.
Yeah, I mean, depending like how far you want to go or what you want to count, but like the Oslo Accords, the Clinton parameters, like there were many offers, there were many chances for Israel to, like, Israel had prime ministers that that were really compromising the existence of Israel. You have people,
Land for peace. Absolutely.
yeah,
Land for peace. Yeah.
you have people like Ehud Olmert right now who are basically saying that what Israel is doing is genocide in Gaza. You have former prime ministers who are basically playing into propaganda against the Palestinian state. Show me one figure like that on the Palestinian side. Show me what, like, and we are talking about prime ministers in Israel that were killed because of how much they were viewed as compromising with the Palestinian state. Show me one Palestinian figure that would risk going a bit further away from what Palestinians want in order to establish peace. You have nothing like that. You have nobody on the Palestinian side who would go out of their way to basically see to make peace with the Israeli state, despite what its population wants. So again, time and time again, Palestinians want violence, and time again, we say, well, maybe if we give them something, they will not want violence. You know, maybe if we return, maybe if we release a couple of terrorists, they'll like us enough to maybe not use them instead of, you know, maybe not calling for the release of those terrorists. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's even further than that, because the people that are really soft-minded and don't think through this. So let's assume that in some fantasy land that we get a peace deal done and we have a second state. Describe the evolution of this great new country for this Muslim population. And give me an example. Do you think they're going to have the kind of oil wealth that the UAE and Bahrain have? And that's how they're going to take that money and funnel it into creating a society that at least gets along with the West right now. Of course, we all know that Qatar and Bahrain and the UAE and Saudi Arabia all eventually want to have Muslim caliphates across the world. We can debate whether most of them are Sunni, of course, and of course Iran wants a Shiite across the whole world. But let's assume that this country comes about, this great new state of Palestine. What's it going to be? What kind of state is it going to be? And we had a discussion the other day about Syria, and somebody pretended that Syria was a real country. Syria is not a real country. Syria is a set of tribes that are in the midst of a massive civil war. They are absolutely massacring the Druze. Israel defended the Druze, and it's not a real country. And it is a failed country. And Lebanon is now a failed country. Beirut went from being one of the most economically successful cities in the Middle East to being a very difficult and dangerous place to live. And it's part of Hezbollah. So I don't understand what in this mystical framework that people are creating, that we're going to get some kind of an Arab state that's going to suddenly stop fighting with Israel. Because, folks, it's so much easier to blame Israel for everything than it is to actually get to the hard work of creating a functioning society. And I have yet to see a real functioning society in any of the countries surrounding Israel.
Somebody says you will need to figure out some symbolic right of return, settling move, give them something else, try to smooth it out. Why? Like, why are we appeasing? Why is it not on Palestinians to offer something to Israel? Why is for October 7, for every single war they started against the Israeli state? Why is it always the demand of Israel to actually do something? Why is it always on Israel to be like the big guy in the room, to give up something, to appease the terrorists in Gaza, to appease, not like even calling them terrorists is sort of like letting sort of not really acknowledging what it is, because Hamas is the representative government of the Palestinian people. When you go, well, the Palestinian parliament is of course defunct, but if you went to see and counted the number of seats, majority of them would be held by Hamas, because this is who they elected to represent them. So why not ask Hamas to give up something? Why not ask the Palestinian Authority? They are the ones. Like, Israel has the upper hand. Israel has the don't like to say that might is power, but Israel has the they have the moral right. Israel is the free country. Israel is the country that is actually respecting individual rights. If Palestinians want peace, if they want some sort of free, they should offer something. But well, first, it's way too late. It's way too late for them to ask to get better. You started a war. This is how it goes. It's you can only talk to people as long as we are in a peaceful state. When the South decided to secede from the Union, that's it. You do not get any more conversation. You do not get your choice if you want to keep your slaves or not. You will do what we say we do because you decided to go to war against us. And this is what should be applied to every single state that decides to go to war. You don't get to dictate what's going to happen after.
Yeah,
Michael?
this is true of every other, it's true of every other armed conflict in the world. You don't hear any of these do-gooders screaming at Russia, who started the war with Ukraine, has been fighting for years now, and in a disastrous situation. You don't hear any of this, and you don't hear anybody in the UN screaming that Russia took over Crimea or Chechnya, sorry, and took
Crimea.
over land.
Oh,
Crimea.
Well, it depends when you mean. They took both.
Yeah, both. They took both. I thought so. Sorry. You don't hear any of that. And there's no right of return of anybody of the people there. It's just because Putin is a total autocrat, and people are generally afraid of them, and also because Putin doesn't respond to any of this crap. And Israel makes a terrible mistake about actually arguing about this. But you're quite right. Hamas needs to stand down, return the hostages, and get out. And remember, many of the leaders of Hamas are already out, living in very plush situations, many of them with hundreds of millions of dollars of net worth, if not billions of net worth, thanks to all the do-gooders, mainly in Europe, a lot in the US, and all this tax money that has gone to support this terrorist regime, while they give orders from Qatar while people are getting killed. There is a single fault here. Hamas began a war. It is getting the crap kicked out of it. We can debate whether the Israeli strategy in the war has been successful. I would say modestly successful at all, because frankly, we still have hostages there, and there's still occasional missiles, and we're still having soldiers die there. So it's been dragging way too long. But in general, Israel has fought beautifully against the entire Iranian axis of evil, and including taking out Iran. It has not been as effective against the Houthis. It neutralized Hezbollah and so on. But the problem here, folks, is not Israel at all. It's not even a little bit Israel. And Israel should, as Daniel said, Israel shouldn't be giving anything here. Israel gets all of the hostages back, the 30 dead ones and the 20 live ones, assuming those numbers still hold. Hamas gets out of power, and then probably with America leading, the only solution I can see over the next 10 years during the so-called rebuilding phase, assuming that even happens, and then God knows what side Trump is on this day when he woke up from bed this morning, which side he is on, moving these people out, quote, displacing them, or so on. But they will have no right to dictate any of this crap. One thing I will say, just to add here, there's no chance, I don't think, that the U.S. is going to go along with this crap, this two-state solution. And I think this is all very choreographed. I mean, especially Britain's baloney threat that they're going to support a Palestinian state if the war is continuing. So it's a very odd position that Britain has decided to take, right? Because how do you put a two-state together when one of the states is under massive fire? There's no state there right now. All it is a war zone. So I think this is all choreographed, and everybody's fully aware that Donald Trump is not going to back any of this crap. If we do get a Democratic president in the next election, which anything is possible, then I'm sure Macron or whoever and the Labour Party in the UK will come back and try to do this. But I think this is a lot of fiasco, and it's really bad.
I'm trying to think, because that would be actually kind of interesting to see, because trying to remember when the next UK general election is going to be, because the way it is right now, Labour is losing hard. Although there is a new party, I'm not sure if you've heard, Jeremy Corbyn founded a new party. I'm not sure if they decided on the name yet, but in the polling data, it was showing that basically it would be polling all around the Labour. So basically about half of Labour voters would go to, or not necessarily half of them, because some of them would come from other parties, but basically they would share around the same thing. So yeah, we might get like real anti-Israel party in the UK Parliament, definitely, and hopefully not the UK government. But yeah, when it comes to sort of like recognizing the Palestinian state, again, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really change anything. The only thing it really does is basically it's the moral argument that is being put out against Israel. It's the fact that institution after institution, and now they have so many to say, and all of them are part of the UN. All of them are basically the same thing. But basically, one more thing they can hang over the head of Israel. One more thing of, well, even the UN has recognized this as an occupied Palestinian territory, and the UN has recognized the Palestinian state as an official part of the UN. Now, when it comes to the entry of the Palestinian territories into the UN, that would have to be agreed by all five permanent members of the UN Security Council. So as long as America is against it, it won't happen. But again, UN only has the power you give them. If ICJ goes against you, you just don't show up. If ICC puts out warrant against you, you just ignore them. UN is not a legitimate country. It's not a legitimate organization. You shouldn't go there. Israel should leave. Israel should no longer tolerate the blood libel that is going on there every single day. We have a super chat from Knows Too Much. Thank you so much. He says, how many pan-Arab Muslims occupying Gaza support Palestinianism? Surely over 95%, including almost all those who don't specifically support Hamas. I mean, absolutely, because you just look at what Arab countries around the world are doing. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia said he doesn't care about the Palestinian issue, but he knows his people do. So he needs to put on the face. He needs to basically, yeah, show that, oh yeah, we do support the Palestinian state. Which, funnily enough, let me show one clip. So again, you had a meeting at the UN, and we have this clip of protesters protesting the Saudi Arabian foreign minister. So, Michael, what are they protesting? Maybe the human rights abuses by Saudi Arabia, the not enough of democracy, the repression of the women.
Women, yes, yeah.
Let's see what they are
Being,
protesting.
by the way, LGBTQ is all illegal. That sort of stuff. Illegal, folks. Jail or death.
Let's see.
Yep.
Oh yeah, of course, they are protesting Saudi Arabia for their complicity with, and I'm using the quotes. Somebody earlier said the Guterres clip had subtitles. The reason why I was saying it is for people on the podcast. So I'm saying quotation marks the Israeli genocide in Gaza.
Yes.
I mean, Michael, like this, I want to say this is like perversion of justice, but it's even more than that. Like the fact that all focus is on Israel, despite everything that's going on. And I don't mean by that to say that, because there are war things happening somewhere else, you shouldn't care about like things that are happening, closer to you or something. But the fact that everything is focused on Israel, which again is not even doing anything bad. So
Well, we know that the number of UN sanctions and UN security resolutions and other UN resolutions against Israel is I believe exceeds the total number of all other resolutions against every other country in the last decade or more. I mean,
it's true in 2023 and 2022. I know that for sure. I'm not sure how it's in total, but yeah, at least.
right.
And
Yeah.
2022, we are talking about before October 7th. So, and even
Yeah.
in that year, there were more resolutions against Israel than everything else combined.
Else, everything else, yeah, including what's going on. But I think you're right. The problem is not whether Israel is doing anything bad. And doesn't make mistakes. Of course, every country does. But the problem is with the moral clarity here and the philosophical basis. First of all, screaming from the river to the sea is calling for the genocide of Israelis and Jews. Period. There's no middle ground about from the middle. That means leveling. If you had a nuclear bomb and you're Iran, you will take out Israel, and there will be nothing from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And it would be great if these idiot kids, for the most part, who are all protesting, had any clue about which river and which sea. And most of them do not. The second point is, though, and it's worse because it's anti liberty, it's anti-capitalist, it's anti-American, it's anti-Israeli, it's anti-democracy, it's anti-meritocracy. It's pretty much a condemnation of all of the West's progress and individual freedoms is what these kids are really standing for. And this discovery over the last 6 to 12 months that, well, when you're actually saying you're anti-Zionist, or it's actually not, it actually is anti-Semitic, and it's actually anti-Western, and what you really mean is death to America, death to Israel, and what you really mean is globalize the Intifada, which a lot of these kids are saying also. And it would be, I mean this sincerely, a lot of these idiot kids that are saying globalize the Intifada should walk by one of these suicide bombers and have their arm blown off, and then let's see how they feel about globalizing the Intifada. But when you're sitting there in your comfortable $80,000 a year Colombian student situation, living in New York City and jumping up at the UN, and that's a stereotype of a lot of these idiots. When violence is no part of you, and you have microaggressions against you, and that's what you're upset about, not people actually losing limbs and lives. It's very simple to be this stupid, and you see it. But it's really a very much more deeply seated problem of truly suicidal. This is society's suicide. This is Western societal suicide, where you hate yourself and you hate the fact that you were successful. You belong to a group that has decided that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that reason and purpose and self-esteem were central to living a good life, or at least given the option to live a good life. You are countering all that. And you believe somehow that people that believe there's some mystical place to go after we die, and if you're a man, you get 72 virgins, and that's good. And if you follow Sharia law and pray 5 times a day, it's absolutely remarkable how badly screwed up these kids have become. And remember, they didn't get screwed up on their own. They got screwed up because their parents didn't bother and their teachers corrupted them. If there's another way they got screwed up, you can blame it on TikTok, you can blame it on X, you can blame it on whatever. But the educational system in this country, and the lack of philosophy and the lack of admiration for the success of Western society, when really these kids should be so thrilled to live in an era when their iPhone, which came purely out of Western society. It didn't come out of Eastern mystical medicine. It didn't come out of anything from the Middle East. That they can be on their iPhone and they can enjoy the great technological breakthroughs, the great medical breakthroughs that we've had. And they've repudiated all of it. And that's the problem with these kids. And that's the problem with the stupidity. And it doesn't help that our newscasters put it up there like these kids have any leg to stand on, that just being that stupid doesn't give you the moral clarity or right. Just being so stupid, and they ought to be called out for it, because what they're talking about is suicidal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering if I should comment on something in the chat. I'll leave it. I think I'm disappointed in people, in humanity enough for today as it is. So I don't want to read that. But to sort of go to some of the last thoughts is when you look at the UN and the purpose of the UN, almost from day one, the goal seems to be pretty much the wiping out of Israel, or at least one of the, I kind of don't want to say that it's the number one goal of the UN, but when you look at what they actually do, what they spend time, what they spend at the General Assembly to discuss, it really does seem like Israel is the only thing they care for. I think somebody had a quote that if you judge the world by what the UN talks about, you would think that the only countries that violate human rights are the Western countries because of how much they focus on them instead of the actual authoritarian ones. But with that, Michael, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
Yeah, I go back to people and to please ask them to recognize how far it is that these so-called states that we're going to mystically create, they have a long way to go, and they have to have leadership that wants to help them get there. It's few and far between the countries that are actually able to make it, that are able to pick themselves up from the ground and from disastrous situation, and what these folks have gone through to some kind of productive society that in 20 years, when the next generation comes around, can actually supply jobs and a reasonable standard of living. So I think it would behoove everyone to look at some history and also to look at the philosophy that underlies things. You basically have two choices. You can have a liberty-based philosophy that recognizes individual rights, or you can go with the sheiks of the Middle East and just have so much oil or whatever other natural resource that you simply have enough money to go around and just wash the society out. 90% of the people live in lower middle class / upper poverty, and 10% of the people own most of the wealth. And that's the other way you can create a so-called successful society, because people get confused about that. I don't believe in that. I believe that we should have societies that are 80 to 90% thriving to provide jobs and the potential for meaningful existence and a way for happiness. And I think underlying all of this is philosophy. And if you don't have the right philosophy, you simply cannot get there. And I defy anybody to show me a society that has gotten there without recognizing individual rights. There being 80 to 90% of the population enjoys reasonable rights and a potential, at least, as the pursuit of happiness, as we like to say in America. Michael Kaufman, KAUFFMAN, on LinkedIn.
We have a super chat from Knows Too Much. Thank you so much. He says, Western countries keep nurturing and appeasing the evils of Palestinianism. Israel keeps caving into the pressure, teaching genocidal jihadis. It pays off. I mean, exactly, you said it really well. I don't have much to add. It's the fact of the appeasement that allows Palestinians to continue terrorizing Israel. With that, let me remind people that today's episode of the reality show has been sponsored by The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. If you are an objectivist, a scientist, or simply interested in those things, and maybe not either, you can check out the new book from Zoltan Sendes on Amazon, The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. It's a really interesting book that's inspired by the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy a little bit. So in the book, it has 42 chapters, which is the answer to everything, as you might know from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it basically covers 42 questions, some from science, from some general knowledge, and I think handled really well. So check it out on Amazon. Thank you, Michael, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.